Lenin's role in history is colossal. Whether someone likes it or not is irrelevant. There's no escaping that fact. Not because of monuments, slogans, or mythology, but because he was the first person on this planet to seriously attempt something no one before him had even dared to try. To replace blind biological human evolution with a conscious artificial selection of the brain. Not in theory, not in philosophical discussions, but at the scale of an entire country, and in intention, the entire planet. Lenin is uncomfortable not because of what he said, but because of what he tried to do. He didn't just criticize the old order. He attempted to rewire the mechanism by which people rise, survive, and reproduce within society. That's a level of interference most systems never forgive. Before that, life under the emperor followed a simple and stupid rule. If you were born into the right family, you were the elite. Aristocracy, nobility, boyars, merchants, estates, same essence. Family ties, inheritance, money. Pure biology, reproduction, dominance, appropriation. Lenin tried to break this principle, not cosmetically, fundamentally. That's a level of interference most systems never forgive. He started from a simple and very dangerous idea. If a human has a brain capable of doing something beyond eating, sex, and power, then selection should be based not on origin, but on ability. That was the real core of the entire project. Not slogans, not red flags, but a new type of human selection. Yes, it was dirty. Yes, there was blood. And Felix Dzerzhinsky was not a philosopher. He was the enforcer of that selection. But that doesn't change the essence of the process. The lesson is brutal and simple. Societies don't collapse from lack of ideas. They collapse from fear of objective selection. The moment you start measuring real differences, the comfortable hierarchy begins to crack. And that's why this topic is still radioactive. To start a new artificial selection, two things had to be done. First, remove those who lived purely by biology, reproducing, accumulating, appropriating, and nothing else. Second, find the capable. But how do you find capable people when education is a privilege of the few? The answer was obvious and terrifying to the old elites. Mass education, universal literacy, expansion of schools, access to knowledge not by birth, but by fact. In parallel, medicine, a medic in every village, medical schools even during the Civil War, reducing mortality so people could live long enough for their abilities to even have a chance to show up. And it worked. People who would otherwise have died early or remained invisible started to rise. The smartest, the most capable. That's why the Soviet technological leap happened. Industrialization in 10 years that took Europe 100. Ability-based selection plus education and medicine produced a real effect. The country took off. Lenin's attempt wasn't the end of the story. It was the first draft. The tools are only now becoming possible. And that's exactly why the conversation keeps getting buried. Because the next version wouldn't be ideological. It would be technical. And that scares people far more. But then the problem started. The first problem was short range. The system lasted only 3 generations. The second problem was lack of objectivity. After Stalin, the communists never managed to abandon selection based on ideological loyalty. They selected the correct, not the intelligent, and then acted surprised when loyal idiots failed to produce a smart system. Socialism didn't collapse because of economics or external enemies. It collapsed because it overestimated the cortex and underestimated the limbic system. The system tried to rely on reason and collective responsibility, but in the end it lost to basic brain biology. Instincts of dominance, kinship, and personal gain quietly and methodically took control. If tomographic tools with micron-level resolution had existed back then, If it had been possible to objectively study the living brain, history might have gone very differently. But that didn't exist, and the absence of objective selection led to the inevitable collapse in the 1980s. Now comes the second part of the story, the one discussed even less. Those who came to power were not just reformers, they were hardcore materialists. People who genuinely wanted to understand what consciousness is and where it comes from. And they went all the way. After Lenin's death, a decision was made to study his brain, not symbolically, literally. The world's best specialists were invited, including Oskar Vogt, director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, a man with cutting-edge histological technologies. The Brain Institute was created in Moscow. Hundreds of brains from people of different nationalities were collected. Comparative studies began. The idea was simple and naive: to find cells of genius. Of course, no such cells were found. That was a dead-end idea of the early 20th century. But something far more important happened in the process. Soviet neurobiologists, in particular Ivan Filimonov, proved a fact that caused real heartburn among fascists. Individual variability of the brain outweighs any racial or ethnic differences. People are fundamentally different in brain structure, and this is measurable, objective, morphological. Moreover, a method was developed to compare people using objective neuroanatomical criteria. Yes, only post-mortem, but the foundation was laid. The tool existed. It was sharpened, but never implemented. Because the moment objective brain-based selection appears, the entire familiar power structure collapses: family ties, money, loyalty. And that is exactly what people without any outstanding abilities fear most. So, no matter how much one wants to simplify history into a caricature, the fact remains: an attempt to replace biological human evolution with rational artificial selection did occur. It almost worked, but failed due to the lack of objective tools. And whether you like it or not, that makes Lenin's role in history truly colossal.